everybody, this is Josh Runquist here for Heavy Debriefings, and it's time to talk about the top 10 albums of 2009. A very seminal year in my life in some of the best / worst ways, but thankfully 10 albums in particular really stuck out to me as my favorite. And let's go through them TRL style. Coming in at number 10 is November's Doom with Into Night's Requiem Infernal. And I actually got to see this band at a very one-of-a-kind show that happened in Minnesota known as Minnesota Metal Fest, headlined by Primal Fear. Then, on the undercard was Atheist, then November's Doom, then Destroy, 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 then a bunch of local bands. But it was the closest thing I'll probably ever get to a European festival. And it also kind of shaped who I was as well too, because ever since that point forward, I have loved being able to see as varied of shows as possible. If I could see death doom, progressive death metal, and power metal in one show, I'm a happy guy. And I knew a little bit about November's Doom before that show, but I fell in love with them on that show. I still have the set list from that very show. The band means so near and dear to me. And it all started with this album, the perfect blend of very gothic overtones in the midst of melodic death metal, melodic doom metal, and death doom. Everything done to utter perfection. And this is a band that I feel has only improved with age. While maybe not every album is better than the next one, it is an upward trajectory for the most part. And it started with this album, most definitely. And if you want a great starter band to get into melodic doom metal, death doom, and you want some of the best growls and clean vocals that you're going to hear this side of Dan Swano, of course coming from the magnificent Paul Kerr, I implore you to check out November's Doom, and you might as well start off with this album, Into Night's Requiem Infernal. Coming in at number 9 is the mighty band Mastodon with Crack the Sky. Easily their proggiest, most ambitious album that they've ever put out. It is filled with 70s, 60s, 70s, and 80s prog, and of course that Mastodon sound meshing together into one of my favorite albums from the band. I know this is a very polarizing album because of how proggy it is. It is the Air album of their Elements 4 album piece, and it is, again, very divisive. Some people hate it, some people love it. I love it. Even though if you checked out my episode of Backwards Marathon on Mastodon, you'll see it's smack dab pretty much right in the middle. But I do love the album. I love the keyboards on this album. I love that Brand Daler started singing on this album. I love the themes on here. There's everything to love and appreciate about this. And if you always wanted to check out Mastodon, but it's always been a bit abrasive for you, I think this is the album that you need to start with. It is the least abrasive album that they've put out. It just hits home perfectly if you're a prog fan. And if you are, yeah, this should be the first Mastodon album you check out, Crack the Sky. Coming in at number 8 is the final album that you're going to see from Dredge in this series, sadly. It is Dredge with The Pariah, The Parrot, The Delusion. The third album of their Perfection trilogy that started with El Cielo and Catch Without Arms. The Pariah, The Parrot, The Delusion is probably the most diverse of all three albums. It's got a little bit of everything, but it still sounds like Dredge. It's got very proggy moments, it's got very poppy moments, but it also incorporates little things like a little bit of hip-hop influence at some points, some more post-rock influences that you don't see in other spaces, a lot of slide guitar as well, probably the most slide guitar that you hear on any Dredge album, and it goes all over. It is a very complex, depth-filled album, and it is the last great Dredge album. Of course, there is the album Chuckles and Mr. Squeezy, which maybe I'll talk about if I talk about the band's whole discography, which might not be such a bad idea once I get that new series rolling. But in the meantime, this is a fantastic album for anyone who loves prog, post, art, and alternative rock. If you're looking for something like that, and you're looking for a band that is probably at its most ambitious, check this album out. Coming in at number 7 is the most fun album from the DEVIN Townsend project, Addicted. And going into the 4-album collection that was supposed to originally just be the Devin Townsend project, which is Key, Addicted, Deconstruction, and Ghost. Addicted was supposed to be like the party anthem, and it's funny because he got the inspiration from listening to Nickelback and wanting to create a metal album that kind of purges all of your vices into one. Right before Deconstruction, which is basically a Strap You On Light album, and trust me, we're going to be getting into that. But with this album, any of these songs could have worked on Top 40 radio if rock radio was better. But unfortunately, it's not, so it didn't happen. But this album is so much fun, it's so poppy, it's so catchy. It's got the beginning of Anneke van Giersbergen working with Devin Townsend, who's pretty much worked all the way up till now, and I hope into the future as well. They're just a match made in musical heaven. And Devin is just... he's capable of writing some of the best pop songs ever if his mind wanted to go in that direction. And sometimes it has. But this album, had it worked in any other circumstance, could have been on your local rock radio station. Unfortunately, it was not, but you can still, fortunately, check it out, as this has some of the best Devin Townsend songs ever created, and all you have to do is check it out. Coming up at number 6 is Dream Theater with Black Clouds and Silver Linings. The watershed album for Dream Theater, as this was the breaking point of the band. Everything was either before or after this album. The reason I say that is because this is the final album with Mike Portnoy on drums. And it's the last album that I realized when I did my backwards marathon on Dream Theater that it was the last album I loved from start to finish. Not to say in the Mangini era that there hasn't been songs that I liked or loved, but nothing ever hit me again from start to finish the way Black Clouds and Silver Linings did. It is a prog album's album. You got 19-minute long epics, you got great 7-minute singles, you got everything in between. Everything that you love about the Mike Portnoy era of Dream Theater is categorized in at least one song off this album, which there is not many. But it is filled to the brim with everything you love about the band up to this point. And I'm very glad I got to see them on this tour. It was Progressive Nation 2009, the final Progressive Nation in the United States. And I wonder what would have happened if Mike Portnoy stayed in the band. Would they have kept up Progressive Nation? Who knows? And who's to say? But I will say that this is the final time you'll see Dream Theater in the series, which absolutely breaks my heart, as at one point in my life they were my favorite band of all time. And you could say the same thing that I did about Dream Theater, but I did not burn myself out on Dream Theater. I still love listening to them. But kind of just like Mike Portnoy, I just like the Portnoy era. Although more specifically, everything from Images and Words to Black Clouds and Silver Linings. And again, if you've never checked them out, I think this is a great representation of the band at 2009. And everything after this album feels like it's kind of in a different direction. Everything before this was a conglomerate of so many different things. This is a watershed album. So why don't you start here? Coming in at number 5 is the sophomore album from Long Distance Calling, Avoid the Light. And everything about this album changed my life in so many great ways, and really got me to start appreciating post-metal and post-rock. As I was such a huge prog nerd at the time, well, I still kind of am, but hearing that culmination of progressive and atmospheric moments and cinematic moments was something that I needed to hear in my life, and I'm so glad I did, because everything about this album is pure perfection when it comes to emotional, musical ability and songwriting. While almost all of the album is instrumental, there is one particular track known as The Nearing Grave that features Jonas Rensky of Catatonia, and he does some of the most haunting vocals he's ever done with any band on this album, and it's so perfect to hear. And it's got one of my favorite endings of all time. Everything after the final chorus is one of my favorite moments in all of music. I love everything about it, and it's great to see the career the band has had, as they never wrote the same album twice, and I don't think they ever will. Some albums are completely instrumental, some have a majority of the album featuring vocals of some kind, but all I know is this is one of the most ambitious bands running right now. Unfortunately, they're probably never coming to America, so I won't get the chance to see them. but I'll always have the music. And outside of one particular album, which again, I'll most likely be talking about in the near future, I highly implore you to go check out Avoid the Light if you're interested to see what this band is all about. Coming up at number 4 is Paradise Lost with Faith Divides Us, Death Unites Us, an album and band that is just begging to get a tier ranking for my new series of whatever I call it after no longer calling it Backwards Marathon. More on that at the end of the video. But this is one of my favorite Paradise Lost albums. Everything about this in this heavy rock, heavy metal, near death doom era of Paradise Lost, which they have separate sections of and eras of the band that I love so much, and this is one of the last ones before the growls came back into the band. It gets super duper gloomy and doomy in all the right ways while still having almost a rock tinge to it, which I really appreciate. Yeah, the gothic overtones, the doom elements, the very catchy riffs, and of course, Old Nick's fantastic vocals just layered throughout the entire album. It's a more underrated album in all of Paradise Lost, but I think it's an album that deserves all the love it gets. And if you only check out one Paradise Lost album, you should check out the title track off of this album, because I think it is a fair representation of some of the best that Paradise Lost is capable of. But seriously, if you've never checked them out before, check out this album. If you want lighter, they have lighter moments. If you want heavier, oh, they got heavier. But right here is a great balancing act. You should go check it out. Coming in at number 3 is AMORPHIS with SKYFORGER, my favorite AMORPHIS album. I don't hear a lot of people say that, and that is a shame because this album is just filled to the brim with great riffs, soaring harmonies, vocals galore, instrumentation that is just impeccable, and some of the finest moments of AMORPHIS' career. It is super catchy, it gets super heavy at times. Of course, with that MELODEATH sound, you're gonna have some growls, but there's so many great clean moments that are going on here as well. It's very proggy, very folky, and a little bit of power metal going on. I mean, not like the fast double bass power metal, but more of the subdued power metal that you kind of hear in folk metal sometimes. SKYFORGER has that in spades. This album just captures everything I love about the band in one album, and it's got a little bit of everything. Of course, they got the heavier stuff, they got the lighter stuff on other albums. It's got everything throughout their whole discography in this particular album. And if you want a good starting off point of where to get into AMORPHIS, this is easily the album that you should start with. Coming in at number 2 is Killswitch Engage with their true self-titled album. If you checked out my Backwards Marathon on Killswitch Engage, you know how I discussed the difference between their very first album that is also called Killswitch Engage and this particular album, which I feel is the proper self-titled album. Again, if you want that explanation, go check out that video. But for this particular time, it's time to talk about the final album from Howard Jones on Killswitch Engage, and it's a really sad album because this really does feel like a breakup album. You can hear it in the lyrics, you can hear it in the music. Howard is doing the most clean vocals that he's done in Killswitch Engage. He's almost saying goodbye to the band on this album before any of us even realized it. I mean, even in a song like Starting Over, which is such a great relationship song, whether it's someone you love, whether it's someone in your family, whatever the case is, it almost feels like it's Howard singing that song to the band, wanting to start the band over again and just wanting to get back into a better way of things, but unfortunately, that was not in the cards. This, I feel, is the most underrated true album from Killswitch Engage. Again, Backwards Marathon for more explanation, but I never see anyone talk about this album enough. This one always gets buried, probably because the band nearly imploded because of this album, and with Howard Jones leaving and Jesse Leach coming back into the band a few years later. But all of that said, every song on here is absolute magic. If you're looking to get into that new wave of American heavy metal, or as I like to call it, second wave metalcore sound, and you like things a little more poppier, a little more rocky, this is an album you need to check out, and it's a great starting point if you want to get into that style. And finally, at number 1, my favorite album of 2009 is, of course, Woods of Ypres, with Woods 4, the Green Album, the penultimate album from the band, and of course the band's 4th album along with that, is an album of relationships lost, be it death, breakups, or by other means. and the misery that comes before, during, and after all of it. It is one of the saddest albums ever made. Not the saddest, trust me. Especially when talking about Woods of Ypres, we're gonna get to what is potentially the saddest album ever made later in the series. But with this particular album, it's a little rawer than their final album. It is much better production than their previous albums, and it's got everything that I love about the band in one package. It's got the gothic moments, it's got the doom moments, it's got the melodic black metal moments, it's got some of the most haunting, depressing, sad vocals ever laid down by David Gold, which of course, not the saddest, but close to. Everything about this album is doom and gloom by the literal definition, and it's one of my favorite albums of all time. And if you want to know a little bit more about it, all you need to do is go check it out. And check out their final album, Wink Wink, Nudge Nudge. And there you go folks, my top 10 albums of 2009. One more decade down and one full decade left to go, with 2 more after that, so hey, 12 episodes left in this series. So what do you think? Do you like the albums that you heard? Do you not like them? Did you make any new discoveries, or do you just want to bash me for my own personal humble opinion? Let me know down below. And if you like what I'm doing, of course, like, comment, share, subscribe, all of that bull crap that goes into this, because I want to keep delivering this, and I want you to be able to keep seeing it in your natural reach. And until the next video, be it an interview, review, top 10 list, or any other kind of video that I put up here on the Heavy Debriefings YouTube channel, for Heavy Debriefings, this is Josh Runquist saying, see ya.